So what is the problem, you might be wondering? With the policy changes for the two major airlines, why is there an uproar over that? They're controlling these dangerous, out of control emotional support animals. That's a good thing, right? Well, the problem is that the media is only telling you part of the story. They're feeding you what you want to hear without including the whole story in it. And the whole story is that it isn't just emotional support animals that they're controlling. They are also going after psychiatric service animals. And you might think, well, what's the difference? A glorified emotional support animal. No, there's a big difference. Psychiatric service dogs, by law, must have the same excellent level of training and behavior as any other type of service dog. Guide dogs, dogs for people in wheelchairs, hearing alert dogs, diabetic alert dogs. Psychiatric service dogs are to have the same excellent level of training and behavior. The only difference with the psychiatric service dog is that it just happens to serve somebody with a psychiatric illness. So what many people fail to realize is that far more things are considered mental illness than they even thought of. And all of these people are being discriminated against by these policies at these airlines. Let's go ahead and take a look at just what some of them are, not even all of them. Neurodevelopmental disorders. Intellectual disability. It formerly was known as being retarded. It can cause a wide range of problems functioning, both mentally and physically. Developmental delay, same thing. Autism. Autism is considered a mental illness. ADHD. And there's our beloved bipolar disorder, which classically people do recognize as a mental illness. Anxiety disorders. Trauma and stressor-related disorders. Acute stress disorder. Adjustment disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Like our service people are coming back with, they'll skirt the issue. Some will even say, oh, no, it's not a mental illness. Yes, it is. So they're discriminating against service members with properly trained service dogs. Those dogs for PTSD are psychiatric service dogs. Then we have the dissociative disorders, also classically recognized as a mental illness. Somatic symptom and related disorders. This has to do with people that have something that go wrong in their head, and it actually causes physical pain and symptoms. They're not making it up in their head. They're actually having these pain and symptoms that can quite badly interfere with the physical functioning of the body. Feeding and eating disorders. Anorexia, bulimia, rumination disorder, which is regurgitating food, binge eating, sleep-wake disorders. These are all considered mental illnesses. Narcolepsy, when you have insomnia, consistently have insomnia, that's a mental illness. Breathing-related sleep disorders. So sleep apnea is considered a mental illness. Parasomnias, that is abnormal behaviors that take place during sleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, your whole functioning is badly compromised, depending on how much sleep you're losing. I have a particular problem with this. This is a symptom of my mental illness. Disruptive impulse control and conduct disorders, kleptomania, pyromania. People would kind of recognize those as mental illnesses. substance-related and addictive disorders. Isn't this ridiculous? Alcohol-related disorders, cannabis-related disorders, inhalant use disorders, stimulant use disorders, tobacco use disorder. So anybody that smokes cigarettes is mentally ill. Welcome to the family. Neurocognitive disorders. We're still on the list of mental illnesses. That is, part of the manual. This is listed in the manual. Delirium. Major and mild neurocognitive disorders. Listen to this. Major and mild neurocognitive disorders have the primary feature of acquired cognitive decline in one or more areas, including memory, attention, language, learning, and perception. These cognitive disorders can be due to medical conditions including Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, vascular disease. So if you have a decline of cognitive functioning due to these other conditions, you have a mental illness. Welcome to the family. Then we have the personality disorders. People classically recognize those. So, as we can see, there is a whole host of people that have mental illness that are potentially discriminated against by these new policies. Of course, half of these people or more will not be harassed by the airlines because they're going to go by what their own definition of mental illness is. So while some of these people will have no problems, others of us, due to the stigma, will have great amounts of problems and extra expense. So all that being said, all that information that you've now gotten, let's go look at a really good article that talks about this very thing. Potential PR nightmare. How airlines choose to discriminate, from Psychiatric Service Dog Partners. And this is by Bradley W. Morris. Full props and credit to him. Our Director of Government Relations explains how, in 2018, airlines are still choosing to violate civil rights by systematically discriminating against people with mental health disabilities. He retains copyright over this article for purposes of publishing it elsewhere. Delta and United are updating their service animal policies effective March 1st. By doing so, they are drawing attention to themselves that may come back to bite the airline industry. For years now, public confusion and sensationalized reports have shielded airlines from an ongoing backlash over their policies. Advocates like me hope the present spotlight will finally reveal these policies clearly and unacceptably violate people's civil rights, of course. Potential PR nightmare, how airlines choose to discriminate. Our Director of Government Relations explains how, in 2018, airlines are still choosing to violate civil rights by systematically discriminating against people with mental health disabilities. He retains copyright over this article for purposes of publishing it elsewhere, by Bradley W. Morris. Delta and United are updating their service animal policies effective March 1st. By doing so, they are drawing attention to themselves that may come back to bite the airline industry. For years now, public confusion and sensationalized reports have shielded airlines from an organized backlash over their policies. Advocates like me hope the present spotlight will finally reveal these policies clearly and unacceptably violate people's civil rights. Of course, history teaches us that the second step is getting others to care enough to take action. Is discrimination always about race? Often talk of discrimination and civil rights focuses on race. Most people would agree it would be wrong if airlines were to require only people of color to get documentation from their local police to verify that they are okay to travel. This situation isn't about race, but it shares elements of that scenario where a marginalized group is despicably picked on by airlines, making travel harder for them. Of course, folks with multiple marginalized characteristics are even more at risk. What are people confused about? It's easier to discriminate against a class of people if there's a cloud of confusion hanging over the discrimination. So the first step to seeing through the fog is a crash course in the background. A service dog is trained to help their disabled person, trained for good behavior in public, and is accustomed to being in stressful, no-pet places. Those aspects generally don't vary across service dogs, so the differences among them are in exactly how they help their person and what kind of disability their person has. A guide dog is a service dog that helps someone who's blind or has low vision, of course. A psychiatric service dog is a service dog that helps someone with a mental health disability. A hearing alert dog is a service dog that helps someone who's deaf or hard of hearing. On its own, this would clarify that whatever the disability type, a service dog is a service dog. The training expectations and levels of public behavior support animals, which are also for a disability, but usually aren't trained or used to being in stressful, no-pet places. This confusion leads to outrage that is often misdirected at all people with mental health disabilities. Amen to that. How are the airlines choosing to discriminate? Airlines segregate people with mental health disabilities for harsher treatment than people get when they have any other kind of disability type. They are presumed guilty until proven innocent, forced to obtain, provide, and carry a special doctor's note, and to give at least 48-hour notice. It might make more sense if airlines were instead to treat people differently based on whether they're planning to bring a service dog versus an untrained emotional support animal. However, by lumping together people who use psychiatric service dogs with people who use ACEs, airlines couldn't be more clearly singling out people purely on the basis of having a mental health disability. If you're thinking this sounds like a policy decision from last century, advocates agree that this kind of discrimination has no place in a civilized society. How is this possible in this day and age? There is some controversy as to whether this kind of outright discrimination is even legal. The Air Carrier Access Act covers flying, unlike the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ACAA is a very short piece of legislation that simply prohibits discrimination based on disability. Presumably, it wouldn't allow airlines to treat blind people worse than deaf people or people with diabetes worse than people with PTSD. The Department of Transportation, DOT, is supposed to enforce this law, and part of DOT's job is to write regulations that spell out exactly how airlines aren't allowed to discriminate. DOT is definitely blameworthy here for articulating special exceptions and how airlines are allowed to discriminate against people with mental health disabilities. However, DOT is technically not forcing airlines to do this. They simply allow airlines to put extra requirements in place. What this means is that through their policies, airlines choose to systematically discriminate on the basis of disability type, making life harder specifically for passengers with mental health disabilities, and actually keeping many of them from flying. Airlines could choose not to discriminate based on disability type, if they cared to. They could have one policy for service animal users and a separate one for ACE users. That might be justified based on the different training expectations. What does not make sense in a just society is that airlines can hide behind a screen of public confusion and outrage in order to wallet people with one type of disability. How could I possibly do anything? This is a ticking public relations bomb. They are only going to stop their systematic discrimination if you, the educated reader, make them believe that bomb is about to explode. There's a simple message you can pass along. Stop systematically discriminating against people with mental health disabilities with your outdated service animal policies. Copy that sentence and the link to this article, then shoot off a message to Delta, to United, and to any other airline you think should see this or stop this. Call the airline trade group, Airlines for America. Let your friends and family and Facebook know this kind of thing has been going on right under their noses. With a few minutes of action, you are the PR nightmare that can change all of this. Most importantly, though, send that message to DOT. Politely write to Blaine Workey at blaineworkey@.gov. Oh, a contact for me. I will be doing so. They've been telling outraged advocates for years they would revisit the regulations. Even though that regulatory update may actually happen soon, they've given no signal they plan to stop the discrimination. It looks like they're actually considering increasing the barriers. Many advocates in this area, like me, are disabled volunteers with extremely low budget nonprofits. If we can't get enough support to change things, we have to try to sue DOT for violating the ACA, and I volunteered to be a plaintiff already. But that would be incredibly hard on our health and fundraising abilities. Today, you can be the ounce of prevention so we're not pounded trying to produce a cure tomorrow. So, I'm asking you, I'm begging you, if you can hear the sound of my voice, can you please do those simple things to help us out? I would like to be able to travel with my extremely well-trained service dog without harassment, without having to spend extra money for documents that I've got to show these people. If I have an emergency need to travel at this point, I'm dead in the water. I can't fly by airplane. I don't have the required documents that they shouldn't be asking for anyway. Please, you know, we're normal people. We happen to battle a mental illness, but there's a difference between battling a mental illness and being stark, raving crazy out of our minds. I'm just a normal person. I want to do normal person things. So please help us out. Post to Facebook. Contact the lady at DOT. Tell your friends and your family. Explain to them what's going on so that, we can get this changed. Because I just want to be just like you guys. Till next video. Bye.